How's it going, everyone? Austin Honecker here. I just wanted to come on here for a while and give him a review for All Elite Wrestling's AEW Dynamite special event Holiday Bash from 4 nights ago, which was December 21st, 2022. I gotta say, it was awesome from start to finish. For the matches, match 1, it was the Elite, which are Kenny Omega, Matt Jackson, and Nick Jackson, versus the Death Triangle, which are Pac, Ray Phoenix, and Penta El Cerro Miedo, in match 5 of the Best of 7 series in a no disqualification match. That was a great match, but the ending to it, the Elite went over cause Matt Jackson pinned Ray Phoenix with the Meltzer driver from Matt and Nick Jackson on a steel chair. Well, after the match, the Death Triangle, which are Pac, Ray Phoenix, and Penta El Cerro Miedo, attacked the Elite, which are Kenny Omega, Matt Jackson, Nick Jackson, Brandon Cutler, and MT Nakazawa, and beat the shit out of them and everything, while Alex Abrahantes was going along with the Death Triangle and everything. That was cool. That was after the match, by the way. Match 2, it was Hook versus Exodus Prime. That was a squash match, but the ending to it, Hook went over with the Red Rum. Now, after the match, the Firm, which are Stokely Hathaway, Lee Moriarty, and W. Morrissey, appeared on the Titantron, and Stokely Hathaway was talking shit towards Hook, and while Stokely Hathaway was talking shit towards Hook, Lee Moriarty was beating the shit out of Jungle Boy, and after Lee Moriarty beat the shit out of Jungle Boy, W. Morrissey executed the choke slam to Jungle Boy into the dumpster, and Lee Moriarty threw trash in the dumpster on top of Jungle Boy and everything. That was cool. That was after the match, by the way. Match 3, it was Jon Moxley versus Darius Martin. That was a great match, but the ending to it, Jon Moxley went over with the Death Rider. Match 4, it was the Guns, which are Colton and Austin Gunn, versus FTR, which are Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler. That was a great match, but the ending to it, the Guns went over cause Austin Gunn pinned Dax Harwood with a roll-up. And match 5, which was the main event, it was Jamie Hayter versus Hikaru Shida for the AEW Women's title. That was a great match, but the ending to it, Jamie Hayter went over and retained the AEW Women's title with the Ripcord Lariat. Now, after the match, Britt Baker and Rebel attacked Hikaru Shida and were beating the shit out of her and everything, and as that was going on, Toni Storm came out and attacked Rebel and knocked her out, laid her out, and then Toni Storm attacked Britt Baker and was beating the shit out of her, and as Toni Storm was beating the shit out of Britt Baker, Jamie Hayter attacked Toni Storm from behind with the AEW Women's title and laid her out, and Britt Baker and Rebel held Toni Storm down, and Jamie Hayter was getting ready to... Jamie Hayter and Rebel held Toni Storm down, and Britt Baker was getting ready to execute the curb stomp on Toni Storm on the AEW Women's title, but before that happened, Saraya came out, and as Saraya came out, Jamie Hayter retreated, and Saraya, when Saraya came out, Saraya attacked Rebel and laid her out, and then as Saraya came down to the ring, Britt Baker tried to attack Saraya, but Saraya laid Britt Baker out with a super kick, and and Britt Baker went out of the ring, and so Toni Storm and Hikaru Shida got back up on their feet, and so a stare down between Saraya, Toni Storm, and Hikaru Shida in the ring, and Britt Baker, Rebel, and Jamie Hayter outside the ring happened and everything. That was cool. That was after the match, by the way, and that was match 4 in the main event. Excuse me, match 5 in the main event, by the way. Now, besides the matches, Ricky Starks came out and cut a promo talking about how he wished he was standing in the ring as the AEW champion, and talked about how MJF took the low road and attacked him and cheated to win and everything, and talked about how he stands in the ring with respect and dignity, unlike MJF, who doesn't have respect and dignity and doesn't have a pair of gonads and everything. And Ricky Starks talked about how him and MJF will meet again, and talked about how he's going to work his way back to the top as to fight for the AEW title, and talked about how he wants to rack up wins and everything. And as Ricky Starks was talking, the Jericho Appreciation Society, which are Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara, and Daniel Garcia, came out, and Chris Jericho got on the microphone and cut a promo talking about how he's been watching Ricky Starks for a long time, and how he's not a dollar store version of anybody, that he's a multi-million-dollar talent, and talked about how he came close to beating MJF for the AEW title, and how he'll be the champion someday, but not anytime soon, and how he wasn't ready and everything, and talked about how he needed a little Chris Jericho in his life for advice and everything, and Chris Jericho offered Ricky Starks to join the Jericho Appreciation Society, but Ricky Starks responded and talked about how Chris Jericho has reinvented himself over the years, and talked about how he's gotten mean, lean, mean, and shredded, and talked about how he dresses like a single father going on his 5th divorce and everything. And Ricky Starks was talking about how he wants to face Chris Jericho on the January 8th edition of AEW Dynamite and everything. And Ricky Starks turned down the offer of joining the Jericho Appreciation Society and everything. And Chris Jericho was talking about how Ricky Starks made the biggest mistake of his life, and said, "Get 'em, boys." And so before Chris Jericho said, "Get 'em, boys," Jake Hager came in the ring from behind and attacked. And after Chris Jericho said, "Get 'em, boys," Jake Hager attacked Ricky Starks from behind, and Sammy Guevara and Daniel Garcia got into the ring, and Sammy Guevara was talking shit towards Ricky Starks, while Jake Hager and Daniel Garcia were beating the shit out of Ricky Starks. And as that was going on, Sammy Guevara and Daniel Garcia held. Well, Jake Hager, Sammy Guevara, and Daniel Garcia were holding Ricky Starks down, and Chris Jericho was getting ready to attack Ricky Starks with Floyd, his baseball bat and everything. And before that happened, Action Andretti came out to the ring, and Chris Jericho tried to strike Action Andretti with the baseball bat, but Action Andretti moved out of the way and executed a springboard crossbody to Chris Jericho. Jake Hager tried to attack Action Andretti, but Action Andretti threw Jake Hager out of the ring, and Sammy Guevara tried to attack Action Andretti, but Action Andretti moved out of the way and executed a lariat and laid Sammy Guevara out. And as all that happened, Ricky Starks attacked Daniel Garcia and threw him out of the ring and everything. And so Ricky Starks and Action Andretti stood tall in the ring while the Jericho Appreciation Society, which are Chris Jericho, Jake Hager, Sammy Guevara, and Daniel Garcia, were outside the ring looking on and everything. That was cool. MJF cut a promo talking about how Bryan Danielson ruined his moment and how he beat Ricky Starks clean and how Bryan Danielson is going to be another victim of his reign of terror and everything. And MJF talked about how he was going to beat Bryan Danielson once and for all and everything. That was cool. Tony Schiavone interviewed Action Andretti. Well, Tony Schiavone brought up about Action Andretti beating Chris Jericho last week on AEW Dynamite's special event, Winter is Coming and everything. And Action Andretti talked about how his win was an upset victory and how he beat the Ocho Chris Jericho and everything. And as Action Andretti was talking, the Jericho Appreciation Society, which are Matt Menard and Angelo Parker, came along, and Action Andretti was getting pissed. And so Angelo Parker was telling Action Andretti to calm down, that he was a great talent and everything. And Matt Menard talked about how Action Andretti was on fire, and so Action Andretti turned around and Chris Jericho threw a fireball in the face of Action Andretti, and as Chris Jericho threw a fireball in the face of Action Andretti, Chris Jericho ended up rubbing Action Andretti's face into the ground and everything. And so the Jericho Appreciation Society, which are Chris Jericho, Matt Menard, and Angelo Parker, stood tall and everything. Just while Action Andretti was laid out and everything. That was cool. Renee Paquette interviewed Bryan Danielson. Well, Renee Paquette brought up to Bryan Danielson about everything that's been going on with MJF and asked about the Blackpool Combat Club and everything. And Bryan Danielson was talking about how the other members of the Blackpool Combat Club, which are Jon Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, and Wheeler Yuta, may have had problems with William Regal and everything, and talked about how they had every right to have problems with William Regal because William Regal has done bad things. And Bryan Danielson was talking about how William Regal's been an inspiration to him and how he was trained by Rudy Boy Gonzalez and Shawn Michaels, but William Regal took him under his wing, helped his wrestling career, helped his life, and made him a better person and everything, and talked about how William Regal taught him that life has consequences and everything. And Bryan Danielson was talking about how he cried when William Regal went to the hospital after that attack from MJF, and talked about how he cried because he didn't think he'd see William Regal again, and how he enjoyed William Regal in AEW and everything, and talked about how William Regal taught him that everything has a consequence and everything. And Bryan Danielson talked about how MJF is going to suffer the consequence and everything, and Bryan Danielson called MJF out, but instead the Firm, which are Stokely Hathaway and Ethan Page, came out, and Stokely Hathaway was talking shit towards Bryan Danielson, but Ethan Page was also talking shit, saying that Bryan Danielson wasn't close to being the number one contender for the AEW title and didn't compete in that Battle Royal and everything, and talked about how Bryan Danielson has jumped the line and everything, and talked about how Bryan Danielson is a vegetable man and everything, and and Stokely Hathaway was insulting Bryan Danielson, but Bryan Danielson was insulting Stokely Hathaway back, and as Ethan Page called Bryan Danielson a vegetable man, well, Bryan Danielson felt threatened and everything, and Bryan Danielson challenged Ethan Page to a match, and Ethan Page talked about how he wasn't going to do it in this shitty town of San Antonio, Texas, because he had his dress pants on and everything. And Ethan Page talked about how if uh, if he'd have faced MJF last week, he'd have been standing there AEW champion and everything. And Ethan Page ended up challenging Bryan Danielson to a match at next week on AEW Dynamite's special event New Year's Smash and everything. And so the Firm, which are Stokely Hathaway and Ethan Page, left to go backstage, and Bryan Danielson stood tall and everything. That was cool. John Moxley cut a promo talking about how he was going to be teaming with Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta in a $300,000 Casino Trios Battle Royal and everything, and talked about how he was getting tired of Hangman Page coming after him and wanting to slug it out, but instead was wanting him in the ring and everything, and talked about how he was going to destroy Hangman Page once and for all, and talked about how he was going to be facing Darius Martin tonight on AEW Dynamite's Holiday Bash and everything, and talked about how he was going to beat Darius Martin's ass and everything as well. That was cool. Samoa Joe cut a promo wishing everyone a happy holiday, and talked about how he hoped everyone has a great holiday, and talked about how Wardlow, hopefully he has a great holiday and everything, and Wardlow was talking about, and Samoa Joe was talking about how Wardlow isn't going to be having a good New Year because Samoa Joe himself is going to be defending the AEW TNT title against Wardlow, and Samoa Joe was talking about how he was going to be teaching Wardlow a lesson and beating the shit out of him and retaining the AEW TNT title and everything. That was cool. AEW aired a vignette of the build-up of the match between Jamie Hayter versus Hikaru Shida for the AEW Women's title. That was cool. Powerhouse Hobbs cut a promo talking about how he watched his uncle overdose when he was a kid, and how he was stabbed and beaten up and robbed and everything. And Powerhouse Hobbs talked about how he was going to create a path of destruction and everything. That was cool. Jeff Jarrett, Jay Lethal, Sanjay Dutt, and Satnam Singh appeared, and Sanjay Dutt done a rap on Billy Gunn and The Acclaimed, which are Max Caster and Anthony Bowens. That was cool. Tony Schiavone hosted a mediation of Rick Ross mediating. Well, Tony Schiavone introduced Rick Ross for a mediation, and Rick Ross. Well, Tony Schiavone called out Keith Lee, so Keith Lee came out. Then Rick Ross talked about how Keith Lee was a big motherfucker and everything, and then Rick Ross introduced Swerve Strickland. So Swerve Strickland came out and was talking shit about Keith Lee, saying that this is not on Keith Lee's time, this is on my time, on his time, and everything, and talked about how Keith Lee couldn't keep his eye on the ball or the AEW tag team titles and everything. And Swerve Strickland talked about how Keith Lee needs to keep eyes on the back of his head and everything. And as that was being said, Parker Boudreaux came out and attacked Keith Lee from behind and was beating the shit out of him, and then Keith Lee retaliated and clotheslined Parker Boudreaux out of the ring, and Keith Lee got out of the ring and was getting ready to attack Swerve Strickland, but Brandon Gootsman attacked Keith Lee from behind and was beating the shit out of him, and then Keith Lee ended up getting offense on Brandon Gootsman, beating the shit out of him, and so Parker Boudreaux intervened and attacked Keith Lee and beat the shit out of him, and so Parker Boudreaux and Brandon Gootsman ganged up on Keith Lee and beat the shit out of him, while Rick Ross was talking shit the whole time this was happening. And Rick Ross introduced the stable as the Mogul affiliates. As the Mogul affiliates. And as Rick Ross was talking shit, and Parker Boudreaux and Grandin Gootsman were beating the shit out of Keith Lee, Parker Boudreaux and Grandin Gootsman placed Keith Lee on the steel steps, and Rick Ross put a cinder block on top of Keith Lee, and Swerve Strickland got on the top rope and executed a diving foot stomp to Keith on the cinder block on Keith Lee's chest and everything. And so Keith Lee was laid out, while the Mogul affiliates, which are Swerve Strickland, Parker Boudreaux, and Grandin Gootsman, along with Rick Ross, stood tall while Keith Lee was laid out and everything. That was cool. The Best Friends, which are Trent Beretta, Chuck Taylor, and Orange Cassidy, and the Dark Order, which are Evil Uno, John Silver, and Alex Reynolds, along with Hangman Page, were talking about what they were going to do with the $300,000 from the $3,000 Trios Casino Royale and everything. That was cool. Now, besides all that, Tony Schiavone, Taz, and Excalibur done commentary throughout the whole show. Excuse me. Now, besides all that, Tony Schiavone, Taz, and Excalibur done commentary throughout the whole show. They done awesome as usual. And Don Callis done guest commentary along with Tony Schiavone, Taz, and Excalibur during the match between the Elite versus the Death Triangle in match 5 of the Best of 7 series in a no disqualification match. Don Callis done great on guest commentary. Okay, the referees for the event were Rick Knox, Paul Turner, Bryce Remsburg, Stephon Smith, and Aubrey Edwards. Okay, Rick Knox refereed the match between the Elite versus the Death Triangle in match 5 of the Best of 7 series in a no disqualification match. Bryce Remsburg refereed the match between Hook versus Exodus Prime. Stephon Smith refereed the match between Jon Moxley versus Darius Martin. Aubrey Edwards refereed the match between The Guns versus FTR. And Paul Turner refereed the match between Jamie Hayter versus Hikaru Shida for the AEW Women's title. All the referees done awesome as usual. Now, the match card that's been announced for All Elite Wrestling's AEW Dynamite's special event New Year's Smash Wednesday night that's been announced so far, it's going to be Samoa Joe versus Wardlow for the AEW TNT title, Bryan Danielson versus Ethan Page, and the Death Triangle, which are Pac, Rey Fenix, and Penta El Cerro Miedo versus the Elite, which are Kenny Omega, Matt Jackson, and Nick Jackson in match 6 of the Best of 7 series in a Falls Count Anywhere match. So the match card for All Elite Wrestling's AEW Dynamite special event New Year's Smash so far that's been announced looks like it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see it, and I'm looking forward to it. But anyway, I just wanted to come on here for a while and give them a review for All Elite Wrestling's AEW Dynamite special event Holiday Bash from 4 nights ago, which was December 21st, 2022. Like I said, it was awesome from start to finish. And with that being said, my name is Austin Honecker, and I will catch your ass down the goddamn road. Peace out.